Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise on the House floor today and move to suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 3074, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3074, a bill to direct the Secretary of the Treasury to stop minting the penny, to require cash transactions to be rounded up or down to the nearest 5 cents and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I also am including for the record the CBO estimate for this legislation.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on the House floor in support of Republican Conference Chairwoman McClain's bill, the Common Sense Act. This is a simple, common sense bill aimed at saving taxpayer dollars and modernizing a part of our currency system that no longer makes economic sense. The numbers speak for themselves. According to an audit of the United States Mint, it costs $3.69 to make 1 penny. That's the 19th year in a row, Mr. Speaker, the government has spent more to make a penny than a penny is worth. Last year alone, taxpayers lost more than $85 million producing pennies. Chairwoman McClain's bill simply codifies President Trump's directive to the Mint, stop producing pennies. Of course, we have to be practical. If we're going to no longer make pennies, people are likely to use more nickels. The problem is that nickels aren't exactly a bargain either, and the gentleman from Massachusetts knows it. They cost nearly 14 cents to produce. So we need to make sure we don't solve one problem by creating another one. And that's why Ms. McClain's bill also gives the U.S. Treasury Secretary the authority to move to a lower cost, zinc-based nickel to ensure that increased nickel demand is not mitigating the savings due to the elimination of the penny. The bill also addresses something retailers and consumers are already experiencing. With fewer pennies available, many cash transactions are rounded to the nearest nickel. H.R. 3074 provides a clear, uniform standard for how these transactions can be rounded, giving businesses certainty and ensuring everyone is playing by the same rules. This bill is about good stewardship of taxpayer dollars. It's about recognizing that when government can do things more efficiently, making smart updates where they're needed, and saving money in the process. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3074, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 3074, the Common Sense Act, sponsored by Representative McClain, and I want to thank the representative along with Representative Robert Garcia for their work on this legislation. The idea to end penny production is not a new one. In fact, other countries like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand have stopped producing pennies themselves. However, many of these countries executed this plan through a deliberate and a meaningful process. Unlike the approach taken by other countries, in February of 2025, President Donald Trump abruptly announced on his Truth Social media account that he directed the Treasury to stop minting pennies. This decision, not surprisingly, ignored the critical role and authority, the constitutional authority of Congress in regulating the currency. So while the Treasury Secretary did carry out President Trump's orders, the administration failed to provide a strategic plan or guidance for the public on how to handle this change, which would impact all segments of the economy. This sudden decision is emblematic of how the administration carries out policy. They do it suddenly, without expert engagement and feedback, and without consideration of potential harms. For these reasons, I was glad to see that Ranking Members Waters and the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, and Representative McLean and Representative Garcia worked together for over a year to thoughtfully provide much-needed clarity to business and consumers in this legislation. In its current form, this bill has made significant improvements from when it was first marked up in our committee. As drafted, the bill now allows businesses to round on cash transactions if exact change cannot be provided, and it also authorizes businesses to continue to round in favor of customers. This legislation also requires the Federal Reserve to prepare a strategic plan in connection with the managing the circulations of the penny. Additionally, the bill will now grapple with potential unintended consequences that come from ending penny productions, like rounding cash transactions on low-income and unbanked communities and more. Mr. Speaker, I congratulate the gentleman from Arkansas for his leadership on this, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of our time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the author of this bill and really ask her for a penny for her thoughts. The gentlewoman from Michigan, our Republican Conference Chair, Ms. McLean.
The gentlelady from Michigan is recognized for
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your help on this. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 3074, the Common Sense Act. This is a straightforward bill that accomplishes one common sense goal. It stops the federal government from losing money on a coin that almost no one uses. Here's the problem. Every penny we mint costs the taxpayers nearly 4 cents. Think about that. We are spending 4 cents to make 1 cent. Last year alone, that absurd math cost the American taxpayers more than $85 million. I think we can be a better steward of the taxpayers' money with that. As a businesswoman, I can assure you that no business owner in my district or myself would ever spend 4 times as much to make $1. Yet that's exactly how Washington has managed the penny year after year. And quite frankly, that does not make sense. The Common Sense Act fixes it. It directs the Treasury to stop minting the penny for general circulation. And quite frankly, that's it. It does not take away a single penny that somebody already owns. Every penny in your pocket, every penny in your piggy bank, in that jar on your counter stays as legal tender if it's unused. This is not a radical idea. President Trump called for it, and it's his common sense idea, and it should become law. I introduced this bill with Congressman Robert Garcia, and it cleared the financial services with strong bipartisan support. So Republicans and Democrats don't agree on much in this town, but we do agree on this. We shouldn't be wasting $85 million a year to keep minting pennies. And not only do we agree, but I'd like to submit for the record support from local industry leaders that also support this common sense piece of legislation. It's time to modernize our currency policy and bring some common sense back to Washington. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this legislation and vote yes. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields.
A reserve.
Gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Garcia, who is also the ranking member of the Oversight Committee.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm proud to co-lead this legislation with Representative Lisa McClain, and I rise, of course, in strong support of this bill. Now, as has been said, we know that a penny costs taxpayers 3.7 cents to produce, so it makes 0 cents to spend almost 4 of those cents, creating only 1. This bill is common sense, it's got bipartisan support, and it saves taxpayers money and reduces waste. Now, in 2023 alone, the Mint lost approximately $180 million making pennies. The reality is that the penny now is just out of date. Now, as the cost of living increases for many, with folks tapping into now technology, cards, phones to pay their bills, we should not be pouring millions and millions of taxpayer dollars into a coin that is now rarely used. And it's not a partisan idea. As has been said, countries from all across the world, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and others, have stopped using and producing low-value coins without any issues or problems for the population. This bill provides clarity by giving businesses the option, not the requirement, to round cash transactions to the nearest nickel when exact change isn't available. It also ensures that existing pennies, which is more than 114 billion of them, will also remain legal tender. And so, folks, you can keep those pennies if you've got them at home. Now, the government should stop spending nearly 4 cents to make 1 cent coins. The Common Sense Act eliminates a wasteful, obsolete coin while protecting pennies as legal tender. Let's stop throwing good money after the bad and pass the Common Sense Act. I yield back.
Yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's a real pleasure for me to yield 3 minutes to our chairman of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas. In my experience of being chairman of the committee on which he serves, he's a man that always comes to the committee and plans on throwing his 2 cents in to every debate. And so I yield him 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate those comments, and I rise today in strong support of the Common Sense Act. This bill's been over a year in the making with my colleagues, Ms. McClain and my colleague from California. And I'm proud of the product that we put forward today. The 1 cent piece, or the penny as it's commonly known, does indeed cost almost 4 cents to produce. And 2024 was the 19th consecutive year the U.S. government lost money keeping the 1 cent piece in circulation. And that's why this year the President rightly ordered the Treasury Department to stop wasting hard-earned taxpayers' monies to produce the coin, and why we're excited to move forward in codifying this action. The Common Sense Act also gives flexibility to the Mint to produce a nickel with cheaper materials. In 1866, Congress mandated the nickel be produced from an alloy of copper and nickel, and we haven't updated the composition since. This bill gives the Mint the flexibility to produce a cheaper coin while retaining Congress's responsibility of coining money. Finally, the bill provides certainty for businesses in their cash transactions with customers without mandating price controls from the government. We're also proud to boast the endorsements of the National Retail Association, the National Grocers Association, the United Steelworkers International Union, and the American Bankers Association, among many. But I must take one moment and note, with the passing of the 1 cent piece, a coin that was mandated in the 1792 Mint Act, a coin that when it was originally produced in 1793 by the United States Mint in that very fledgling facility in Philadelphia, represented 1 cent of pure copper. And over time, with inflation and the changing consumer patterns, we went to the smaller 1 cent piece we now use in 1857. But now, all this time later, the 1 cent piece has passed its prime and time. But it was a coin that was important to commerce from the founding of the country. It was an important coin because every American at least had a few cents in his pocket, even in the toughest times over the last 200 years. But now we move forward. And again, I want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on the Financial Services Committee for making these wise decisions and codifying it. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma yields. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close if the gentleman from Arkansas has no further speakers.
The gentleman from Arkansas has no further speakers and yields to my friend.
Thank you. Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker,
is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation, I congratulate Ms. McLean and Mr. Garcia for their good work. The administration has already ceased penny production, but this legislation does the necessary work of providing meaningful guidance for consumers and businesses across the country. And I again urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Arkansas.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the gentleman from Massachusetts and the minority for helping make this a strong bipartisan bill to do something that is common sense, with no pun intended, that in fact, for all the good reasons that Mr. Lucas and Ms. McLean outlined, this is the right decision at the right time for the American people. And I would just remind both the bankers across the country, the retailers, and all the consumers out there that, as noted by Mr. Garcia, there are well over 100 billion pennies floating around out there in jars and drawers and cash registers across the country. You may still use those pennies to your heart content. I urge a yes vote on this bill, and I yield back to the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3074 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6556 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6556, a bill to prohibit the use of certain concentration limit exceptions with respect to mergers involving a failed bank unless the applicable agency determines such use is necessary to prevent significant economic disruption or significant adverse effects on financial stability and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this legislation.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, also include in the record the Congressional Budget Office score for this bill.
Also without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I rise today in strong support of H.R. 6556, the Failing Bank Acquisition Fairness Act, offered by my friend from Massachusetts. When a bank fails, regulators need to move fast to protect depositors, preserve confidence in our financial system, consider potential buyers, and minimize disruption to families, businesses, and communities. Often, all that takes place in a very short period of time between Friday at close of business and Monday morning at opening for business. At that same time, those decisions should be made by a process that is fair, transparent, and promotes competition. Under current law, federal regulators are generally prohibited from approving a merger or acquisition of a failed or failing bank if the resulting institution would control more than 10% or more of deposits nationwide. However, regulators are allowed to waive these concentration limits under certain circumstances. H.R. 6556 restricts when those concentration limits can be waived to situations in which there are no other qualified bidders for that failed bank, and the transaction is necessary to prevent significant economic disruption or adverse effects on U.S. financial stability. This legislation helps address concentration in the U.S. banking sector and promote more transparent, competitive, and accountable approach to resolving failing banks. This legislation includes critical guardrails, such as requiring regulators to report to Congress within 30 days of a waiver on why the waiver was granted, why other qualified alternatives were not selected, and any recommendations for legislative or regulatory changes to improve competition for future bank resolutions. That transparency helps ensure that these decisions are made in the best interest of depositors, our financial system at large, and of course, the American people. This is a practical bipartisan reform that strengthens oversight, promotes competition, and reinforces confidence in the bank resolution process while preserving regulators' ability to respond to bank failures. I want to thank my friend from Massachusetts, Representative Lynch, for his leadership on this legislation, and our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support H.R. 6556. I reserve.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 6556, the Failing Bank Acquisition Fairness Act, which I introduced in December of 2025. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, and Ms. Waters from California, our ranking member, who advanced this legislation unanimously within the committee. Specifically, the Failing Bank Acquisition Fairness Act will prevent megabanks from dominating the bidding process for acquiring a failed bank if there are other eligible bids from well-capitalized and well-managed mid-sized banks, small and mid-sized banks. In the 3 decades since 1994, the number of commercial banks has declined in this country by approximately 50%, hollowing out the small and mid-sized institutions that have traditionally housed local community capital. Small to mid-sized banks are unable to compete with the larger institutions in the failed bank acquisition process, even when attainable opportunities arise which might result in a more favorable result for depositors and impacted businesses and communities. For example, after the collapse of the First Republic Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, and Signature Bank in 2023, which were the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures in U.S. history, as part of the resolution process, federal regulators, including the FDIC, structured an immensely favorable acquisition process to allow J.P. Morgan Chase, America's biggest bank at the time, to acquire the nearly $230 billion in assets and $103 billion in deposits from the failed Republic Bank. Multiple mid-sized banks sought to acquire First Republic, but failed to compete with J.P. Morgan's sheer asset holdings estimated to be close to $4 trillion. As part of that deal, the FDIC also entered into a comprehensive loss-sharing agreement with J.P. Morgan Chase to incentivize that purchase. In fact, the FDIC agreed to absorb 80% of all credit losses. After effectively winning the government auction, J.P. Morgan quickly announced plans to shut down 1/4 of First Republic's 84 branches, rather than preserving consumer access to their local branches. The closure also led to the firing of approximately 1,000 bank employees. Acquisitions such as these are now the norm rather than the exception. This year, U.S. bank mergers and acquisitions have hit a 7-year high, up 45% since 2024. Consumer advocacy organizations such as Americans for Financial Reform and Better Markets have raised serious concerns about the advantages afforded to large interconnected financial institutions like J.P. Morgan Chase in bidding for these failing banks and, as a result, growing ever larger while accelerating the process of consolidation. To that end, I introduced this legislation, the Failed Bank Acquisition Fairness Act, which, if it were law at the time, would have created a more level playing field between healthy, medium-sized, as well as larger banks to both stabilize markets, but also to better serve depositors, businesses, and the impacted communities in which those banks are located, while avoiding mega banks gobbling up smaller banks and the steady march towards consolidation. Mega banks should not be allowed to take advantage of financial crises to increase their domination and pad their own profits. This legislation would take an important step toward increasing competition and improving the resilience of our financial system from economic shocks. I'm proud that this bill was approved unanimously in committee, every Democrat, every Republican, and to have the support of Americans for financial reform to boot. And I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to join my friend from Massachusetts in the importance of this bill and provide just a couple of minutes of perspective. If you go back to the 1980s, it was a period of third world debt crisis, oil and gas lending crisis, real estate lending crisis, culminating in the late 1980s with really the collapse of the savings and loan industry across the country, from too lax supervision and too lax management of these institutions. And in both large banks like the famous Continental Illinois failure in Chicago to some of the large thrifts, the government chose to keep banks open rather than closing them by essentially taking a note back called open bank assistance. And it essentially increased the losses to the taxpayers. So after the resolution of the saving loan bank crisis and all the other related bank failures of the 1980s and very early 1990s, the government said, look, this is out of hand, and we want to enforce a least cost resolution process when a bank fails, meaning we don't want to lose more money after the closing by trying to keep these banks open. And so they offered this ability that whoever paid the highest price, thus the least cost to the taxpayers, was the winner, which it's good policy. But now it's been 30 years later, and the largest banks in the country, as outlined by the gentleman from Massachusetts, they have a disproportionate ability to bid $1 more and thus be the least cost to the taxpayer. Or maybe after the last debate, 1 penny more and be the least cost to the taxpayer. But that means that it's very hard to compete with them. And what the gentleman from Massachusetts has proposed is, let's have more bidding for those failed banks by crafting a process that's transparent, that Congress oversees, Congress outlines the guardrails where smaller banks could team up with other capital sources and bid for one of those failed banks and end up being in a much more competitive process. And what the government gets is a more diversified, more competitive banking system instead of the default winner being one of the big 5 existing financial institutions. I want to thank him for the work on this. Thank Chairman Barr of our Financial Institutions Subcommittee, Ranking Member Waters, for bringing our bipartisan team together on the committee and advancing, and I urge members on both sides of the aisle to vote yes on this measure, and I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you. Let me first of all thank Chairman Hill for his kind remarks and his astute observations on the circumstances that have brought us to this point. I will add that I believe this morning it was announced that J.P. Morgan Chase, which was the benefactor of this previous transaction, is now approaching $5 trillion in assets. So that is indeed remarkable, and their market cap is at around about $1 trillion as well. So I think this legislation does point to that loophole that allows mega banks to acquire failing banks, even when other eligible, well-managed, small and mid-sized banks have submitted competing bids, improving community and regional banks' competitiveness and preventing further consolidation among our largest financial institutions. So again, I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Arkansas.
I urge a yes vote on the bill. I appreciate the work on both sides of the aisle, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6556 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The chair lays before the House a message.
To the Congress of the United States, Section 202D of the National Emergencies Act, 50 United States Code 1622D, provides for the automatic termination of a national emergency unless, within 90 days prior to the anniversary date of its declaration, the President publishes in the Federal Register and transmits to the Congress a notice stating that the emergency is to continue in effect beyond the anniversary date. In accordance with this provision, I have sent to the Federal Register for publication the enclosed notice stating that the national emergency with respect to significant transnational criminal organizations declared in Executive Order 13581 of July 24, 2011, under which additional steps were taken in Executive Order 13863 of March 15, 2019, is to continue in effect beyond July 24, 2026. The activities of significant transnational criminal organizations have reached such scope and gravity that they threaten the stability of international political and economic systems. Such organizations are becoming increasingly sophisticated and dangerous to the United States. They are increasingly entrenched in the operations of foreign governments and the international financial system, thereby weakening democratic institutions, degrading the rule of law, and undermining economic markets. These organizations facilitate, aggravate violent civil conflicts, and increasingly facilitate activities of other dangerous persons. Significant transnational criminal organizations continue to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. Therefore, I have determined that it is necessary to continue the national emergency with respect to significant transnational criminal organizations declared in Executive Order 13581. Signed sincerely, Donald J. Trump, the White House, July 13, 2026.
Referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and ordered printed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1423, I call up Bill H.R. 1181 and ask for its immediate consideration by the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 447, H.R. 1181, a bill to prohibit payment card networks and covered entities from requiring the use of or assigning merchant category codes that distinguish a firearms retailer from general merchandise retailer or sporting goods retailer and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1423, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Financial Services printed in the bill is adopted, and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Financial Services or their respective designee. The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, each will control 30 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
I rise today in support of Mr. Moore's Protecting Privacy and Purchases Act. Financial privacy is fundamental to consumer trust and confidence in our financial system. As technology continues to transform financial services, protecting Americans' financial privacy remains an essential part of Congress's oversight role. Merchant category codes were designed to help process transactions, not create mechanisms for tracking or categorizing lawful purchases. Maintaining trust in the payment system requires clear safeguards to ensure that these tools are used for commerce, not consumer surveillance. H.R. 1181 establishes those safeguards by preventing payment card networks and processors from using merchant category codes to target firearms retailers and their customers. The Protecting Privacy and Purchases Act provides important protections for consumers by preventing the misuse of payment systems to monitor lawful purchasing activity. Consumers should not have to sacrifice their financial privacy in order to participate in our modern economy. Protecting financial privacy helps reinforce confidence in the institutions and infrastructure that our payment systems operate around. Americans should be able to participate in the economy with confidence that their lawful transactions are simply being processed, not tracked or categorized or scrutinized beyond what's never necessary to essentially facilitate the payment. This bill helps preserve the integrity of that payment system by keeping it focused on facilitating commerce and efficient movement of funds. Importantly, this bill does not interfere with any existing law enforcement authorities, anti-money laundering requirements, fraud prevention efforts, or other obligations designed to protect consumers and safeguard our financial system. H.R. 1181 is a common-sense measure that simply safeguards financial privacy while maintaining the integrity of our nation's payment network. I urge all my colleagues to support the legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. Chair recognizes the lady from California, Ms. Waters.
Thank you very much for my time, such time as I consume.
Gentlelady's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The lady's recognized.
I strongly oppose this bill because it limits efforts to detect and investigate gun violence and acts of terrorism. Before I discuss the bill, let's start with a few sobering statistics. 46,000 Americans die from gun violence every year. That comes out to an average of more than 125 Americans losing their life each day due to gun violence. Of course, America is unusual in this regard. Americans are 26 times more likely to be shot and killed than if you lived in any other high-income country. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans say they have personally witnessed someone shot. In the past decade, more than 1.2 million Americans have been shot, with more than 400,000 who died from gun violence. For many who survive a gunshot, they may still suffer a lifetime of devastating consequences. Most of these data points comes from Guilford's, a gun violence prevention group set up by our former colleague in the House, Gabby Guilford's. Of course, she herself was shot when she served as a congresswoman, and she later set up the group following the Sandy Hook Elementary mass shooting when 20 children and 6 educators lost their lives. Now, a few states, including California, New York, and Colorado, have taken action to require payment card networks to use a merchant Category Code, or an MCC, to distinguish firearm retails from other types of retailers. Many different types of retailers have unique MCC codes, including florists, barbershops, art dealers, automotive tire shops, and even candy stores. While these merchants' codes don't reveal what individual goods are purchased, they can indicate an unusually large purchase of a type of business that might reveal a risk. This information could help law enforcement track suspicious purchases and prevent even more gun violence. Leading gun safety groups, including Brady, Community Justice, Everytown for Gun Safety, Clifford's, Guns Down America, and Newtown Action Alliance, that is sent the House a letter to urge members to vote no on this harmful legislation. In my letter, they said, the letter that was sent to me said, quote, "We write in strong opposition to H.R. 1181, the Protecting Privacy in Purchases Act. This bill would make it easier for mass shooters, gun traffickers, and even terrorists to abuse our financial systems to stockpile firearms and ammunition undetected." They go on to note that between 2007 and 2018, credit cards were used to finance at least 8 major mass shootings. One of these included the shooting at Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, where 49 people were killed and nearly 60 more were injured in a decade ago last month, in June 2016. Now listen to this. Just days before the shooter opened fire, his intended search history included the terms credit card unusual spending, FBI, and why banks stop your purchases. He had opened 6 new credit card accounts in the 8 months prior and 12 days before the shooting. He spent more than $26,000 on things like a rifle, a semi-automatic pistol, several large magazines, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Before this, his average monthly spending on his single card was $1,500. None of the credit card operators, payment processors, or banks were alerted to the types of transactions being undertaken, and they did not notify law enforcement officials about these purchases. We don't know for sure, but had these MCC codes been in place for gun shops back then, a financial institution would have been empowered to report these suspicious credit card purchases to law enforcement. Americans are tired of the senseless gun violence and want Congress to do something to curb it. Unfortunately, this bill goes in the opposite direction and would implement a ban on such merchant reporting on the federal level and would literally preempt existing state laws like those in California, New York, and Colorado. And so, I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
The lady from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman, the sponsor of this bill, Mr. Moore of West Virginia.
Gentleman from West Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of my bill, H.R. 1181, the Protecting Privacy in Purchases Act. My bill preserves 2 fundamental rights, the right to privacy and the right to bear arms. Americans should not be forced to disclose to payment processors when they buy a firearm. The bill preserves Americans' rights by prohibiting the creation of a separate merchant category code for firearms. This would, of course, become a de facto gun registry. The bill also preempts harmful state laws and gives the Attorney General authority to take any bank or payment processor that assigns or requires a separate code to federal court. For too long, the American people have had their rights undermined by the radical left. The bill's premise is simple: no gun registries, period. In fact, this very body has twice prohibited these unjust registries, once in 1986 and again in 1993 to prohibit the left from destroying Americans' rights. But the gun-grabbing left never stops trying. In 2021, the Progressive Amalgamated Bank lobbied the International Standards Organization to create a separate merchant category code for firearm retailers to advance a backdoor gun registry. Previously, these retailers had always been accurately categorized as miscellaneous retail stores or sporting goods stores. Amalgamated Bank was hell-bent on tracking firearms purchases. It pressured a faceless, unaccountable foreign standards body in Geneva to stand up a new merchant category code explicitly targeting American gun owners and American businesses. When I was state treasurer of West Virginia, we said no to gun-grabbing progressive banks partnering with a European NGO destroying Americans' rights. Under my leadership as state treasurer, West Virginia enacted the first ban on separate merchant category codes for firearms retailers, protecting the privacy of our state's gun owners. 19 states after that followed suit. But a patchwork of state regulations is not enough. California, Colorado, and New York currently mandate that firearms stores have a separate merchant category code, creating a de facto registry in some of the most populous states in our country. This cannot be allowed to stand. We have already seen the Biden administration pressure financial institutions to hand over data on their customers, and a private database of gun owners falling into the hands of a future anti-gun administration is a threat that we cannot accept. Your God-given right to own a firearm doesn't stop at the border of blue states. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues, Representative Barr, Hudson, for their work on this bill, and I also want to thank Chairman Hill for getting it across the finish line. And I also want to thank Representative Stefanik for her leadership on this issue. These are our God-given rights spelled out in our Constitution, and we proudly exercise them. We will not allow an elitist bank partnered with a foreign faceless bureaucracy to rob Americans of their rights to protect themselves. In West Virginia, we don't ask permission to protect ourselves and our families, and no American should ever have to wonder whether buying a firearm will land them on a government watch list. Privacy and gun ownership go hand in hand. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. Thank you, and I yield back.
Yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Congressman Thompson, who is a leader in this Congress against gun violence.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank the gentlewoman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to H.R. 1181, a bill which makes it harder to catch criminals and makes our communities less safe. Today, under current law, financial institutions are required to report suspicious transactions to law enforcement. They do this every day, and that helps catch human traffickers. These alerts give law enforcement leads that uncover human trafficking rings and evidence that help put these bad guys away. The bill on the floor today blocks states from using this same process to flag suspicious firearms transactions to uncover gun trafficking rings. Gun traffickers don't buy guns like responsible gun owners. And once guns are trafficked, we know bad things happen. Approximately 60% of trafficked guns are delivered to convicted felons. The felons who seek out and obtain trafficked firearms are the people who pose the greatest risk to everyone's safety. Mr. Speaker, gun violence is the leading cause of death for children, for teenagers, and for law enforcement in the line of duty. We should be working to break up gun trafficking rings which supply the guns that kill kids and cops. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Kentucky who chairs the subcommittee on financial institutions policy, Mr. Barr.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 1181, the Protecting Privacy in Purchases Act, and I thank my friend, the gentleman from Arkansas, the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, for his leadership on this bill and for yielding. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this legislation. I want to thank Congressman Riley Moore for his leadership on this important bill. I want to thank Congressman Richard Hudson for his longstanding work defending the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens, and our colleague from New York, Elise Stefanik, for her original introduction of this bill in several previous Congresses. At its core, this bill is about protecting privacy and preventing government surveillance on citizens simply for exercising their constitutionally enshrined Second Amendment rights. H.R. 1181 prohibits payment card networks and financial institutions from requiring or assigning merchant category codes, or MCCs, that single out firearm retailers for separate tracking and monitoring. Unfortunately, we have seen repeated examples of progressive regulators and government officials pressuring financial institutions to target lawful industries and lawful customers. From Operation Choke Point under the Obama administration and Choke Point 2.0 under Biden, to the New York financial regulators pressuring insurance companies to abandon longstanding relationships with the NRA, Americans have legitimate reasons to be concerned about the weaponization of the financial system. Despite what those on the other side of the aisle may say, this bill does nothing to prevent law enforcement or regulators from investigating criminal activity, nor does it change the stringent requirements on financial institutions to comply with existing anti-money laundering laws or suspicious activity reporting requirements. But what my friend from California who just spoke, what he doesn't say, but needs to be said, is that the lawful purchase of a firearm protected by the Second Amendment is not in and of itself suspicious activity, nor should it be surveilled by the government. What it does prevent is the creation of a framework that could be used to monitor, flag, and discourage lawful purchases from federally licensed firearm retailers. This is about preventing government actors from using financial data to target Americans who are engaged in conduct expressly protected by the Second Amendment's right to keep and bear arms, a fundamental liberty for Americans. Americans should not have to worry that the lawful purchases that they make will be used to create lists, databases, or surveillance tools aimed at this constitutionally protected activity. My friend, the ranking member from California, cited statistics about annual and daily deaths she says are the result of gun violence. Respectfully, the right to bear arms is not the cause of violence. One murder is too many in America, period. We all agree on that. But rather than blaming gun violence, Congress would be more productive focusing on the root causes of homicide: the breakdown of the family, lack of active parenting, mental illness, open border policies, policies to defund the police, soft on crime policies like no cash bail, and politically motivated violence like the kind that was behind the murder of Charlie Kirk. Addressing these societal problems does not require unconstitutional surveillance of Americans. H.R. 1181 establishes common sense guardrails
to prevent regulatory abuse and safeguard constitutional freedoms. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
From Kentucky yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas
Reserve.
reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Frost, who has been active on this issue of gun violence.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I strongly oppose the Protecting Privacy and Purchases Act. Sponsors claim this bill protects the privacy of gun owners, but in reality it protects mass shooters, terrorists, gun traffickers, and the profits of the firearm industry. Financial institutions have already been using merchant codes to detect crimes like money laundering and human trafficking. They should be allowed to use that same responsible monitoring to help prevent gun violence. I know personally why this matters. The Pulse nightclub shooter opened up 6 new credit cards in 8 months. He racked up more than $26,000 in credit card charges on guns and ammunition in the days before his killing spree in the middle of my district in my home of Orlando, Florida. But our system failed to turn those warning signs into an alert for police. And so he went on and he murdered 49 angels in my community and wounded another 49. Instead of helping to prevent the next tragedy, this bill makes it easier for those warning signs to be missed yet again. It strips law enforcement of an essential tool to stop violence before it happens, making every community in our nation less safe. For this reason, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to committee. And if the House rules permitted, I would have offered an important amendment to make clear that nothing in this bill should prevent law enforcement from using merchant category codes to assist in investigating and preventing acts of terrorism. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the text of this amendment. I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for the motion to recommit, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from California reserves. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan of Ohio.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. You don't give up your Fourth Amendment rights when you're exercising your Second Amendment rights. That's what's happening out there. People's privacy is being invaded. These merchant codes are there so they can track. The government can abuse that and track you. If you don't think I'm right about this, we have the evidence. January 15th, 2021, email from the FBI to Bank of America saying, give us every debit card, credit card purchase of anyone in Washington, D.C. for these particular dates. That's bad enough. That's bad enough. You're allowed to travel in this country, too. That's a right we have. But here's what they also say, and also overlay that with, quote, any historic purchase for weapons or weapon-related purchases. What? We want to know what you bought when you were at a certain location, and we want to know if you ever purchased a gun any time in your life with that credit card or debit card. That's what the FBI asked Bank of America to do. That is how dangerous this practice is, and so that's why the chairman's work and the committee's work is so good, and the sponsor from West Virginia, God bless them. You don't give up your Fourth Amendment rights. Our Constitution protects our First Amendment liberties, our Second Amendment liberties, our Fourth Amendment liberties, all of them. They're all important, and that's why this legislation is critical. And I again want to thank the chairman for his good work and Mr. Moore from West Virginia for sponsoring the bill. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Ohio yields. Gentleman
Reserve.
from Arkansas reserves. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, the ranking member of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, who has always been an advocate against gun violence.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the ranking member. I thank the chair as well. And I also thank those who had the foresight to declare that all persons are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, 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 liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You're not giving up your constitutional rights when you are doing what you can to protect life. I have been to the funerals. I have seen the people who have lost their loved ones to violence, gun violence. And at some point, we have to do more than contend that privacy trumps the right to life. The person's right to life trumps privacy, especially when no court has said that this is unconstitutional. So that is pure speculation on behalf of some people. I believe that the right to life trumps this right to privacy that they're contending. I yield back. Thank you.
Yields back. Gentlelady from California reserves. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the chairman, I thank the sponsor, and I rise in strong support of this bill. This is not about crime. It's about control. Once you can flag a purchase, any purchase, you can flag a person. And once you can flag a person, you can control what they buy, what banks they use, and even what they believe. It is wrong. It's un-American. This bill is not just about guns. It's about the precedent that was set. If we allow financial institutions to become the surveillance arm of one party's political agenda today, there will be no limit to what gets flagged tomorrow. Let me be clear. Buying a firearm is not extremism. Buying a Bible is not extremism. Reading the news you choose and want to read is not extremism. Exercising a constitutional right is not extremism. The extreme position is using America's banks to build a permanent list to track who people worship, what they read, and what constitutional rights they happen to choose to exercise. I urge my colleagues to vote for privacy, to vote for freedom, to vote for the Constitution of the United States of America. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from New Jersey yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlelady from California is now recognized.
And I'll yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Frost.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important to say, because we hear over and over from our colleagues about the Constitution, if using merchant category codes violated the Fourth Amendment, where's your bill on amending this for every purchase at a pharmacy, or every purchase at a liquor store, or every purchase at a casino? This is a standard use, this is a standard accounting tool that's used by banks. And so this argument, unless you're going to follow it up with legislation to essentially make it illegal to track and have the same codes, which is just a 4-digit number, for pharmacies, casinos, liquors, and other things as well, the argument falls flat. Law enforcement still needs this legal process that's already required. Law enforcement needs to go through a legal process to access the financial records here. So it's just not a good argument. We're talking about something that doesn't track what you're buying. It doesn't track the guns you're buying. It won't tell them that. But it's just a general tool to help us stop some of the worst mass shootings. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from California reserves. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Lee.
Gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 1181, the Protecting Privacy in Purchases Act. The Second Amendment is a constitutional right. Americans should not have their lawful purchases singled out simply because they choose to exercise that right. This bill stops efforts to create a special system for identifying and organizing purchases made at firearm and ammunition retailers. While its proponents present this as simply an administrative tool, in practice, it raises serious concerns about privacy and the unjust treatment of lawful conduct. Americans are increasingly concerned about how much information is collected, stored, and shared. Those concerns are especially valid when it comes to information being tracked that relates to the exercise of a constitutional freedom. Because here's the reality. Tracking the lawful purchase of firearms and ammunition creates a framework for collecting information about law-abiding citizens who have done nothing wrong. My home state of Florida already prohibits this type of surveillance. Floridians understand something that most Americans agree with. Your bank should process your transaction, not track your activities. This bill prevents payment networks and financial institutions from requiring special codes for firearms retailers while preserving existing tools used to combat fraud, protect consumers, maintain cybersecurity, and report suspicious activity. At its core, this legislation is about privacy, fairness, and the principle that the exercise of constitutional rights should never become the basis for surveillance. I thank the chairman and the bill's sponsor for their work on this important issue. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1181, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Arkansas reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve, and I tell my friend from California we have no more speakers on the bill.
Okay, thank you. Gentlelady from California is
I
recognized.
yield myself for the balance of the time.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close if the gentleman from Arkansas has no further speakers.
Gentlelady is recognized.
As I conclude, I would just like to point out that when our committee held a hearing last year, none of the majority's witnesses said a single positive thing about this bill in their testimony. That's probably because there is nothing positive to say about this harmful bill. Now, using merchant category codes for firearm retailers won't solve this problem, not even close. The codes themselves don't identify what is purchased, but it might help trigger a flag for unusual and suspicious purchases that gets reported to law enforcement, and that might save 1 life, or 10 lives, or 100 lives, or 1,000 lives, or 10,000 lives, even if it is a fraction of the 416,000 who have died from gun violence over the past decade. Wouldn't it be worth it? And so, Mr. Speaker and members, the audacity of the opposite side of the aisle to tell states you cannot use these merchant codes. Any state in the United States of America, even those who started in some way using these codes, they are now saying they want a law that would preempt your state from being able to use the merchant codes. And so I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized to close.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
I want to thank colleagues on both sides of the aisle for this debate. I want to thank Mr. Moore for writing this bill, drafting it, persuading the support that he has, and I urge all members on both sides of the aisle to support this bill in the name of privacy in the United States, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1423, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to prohibit payment card networks and covered entities from requiring the use of or assigning merchant category codes that distinguish a firearms retailer from general merchandise retailer or sporting goods retailer and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Frost of Florida moves to recommit the bill H.R. 1181 to the Committee on Financial Services.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to.
Speaker, I ask for the
Gentleman
yeas and
from
nays.
California seek recognition. I'm from Florida. I apologize.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilrakis, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, House Resolution 1423, I call up H.R. 139 and ask for immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 139, a bill to make daylight savings time permanent and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1423, the bill is considered read. The bill shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their respective designees. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilrakis, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilrakis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the legislation and to insert extraneous material on H.R. 139.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the Sunshine Protection Act. This important legislation will finally end the outdated practice of changing our clocks twice a year and establish permanent daylight saving time. For decades, Mr. Speaker, Americans have been asking a simple question. Why are we forcing families, businesses, and communities to adjust their schedules every spring and fall? The twice-yearly clock change is a relic of the past that no longer reflects the way Americans live, work, and conduct business in the 21st century. And I want to thank the main sponsor, the lead sponsor, Mr. Buchanan from the great state of Florida, my good friend, for working so hard on this legislation for quite a few years. And it is coming to fruition, and I know it's very important that we pass this bill. In Florida, Mr. Speaker, this issue is especially important. Our state is home to families, retirees, small businesses, and industries that depend on predictable schedules and the ability to make the most of every single day. Floridians have made it clear that they are ready to ditch the switch, and I want to thank, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, for his strong support of this bill. Changing the clocks twice a year creates unnecessary disruption. I know you agree, Mr. Speaker. It affects sleep patterns, impacts family routines, creates confusion for businesses, and requires everyone from parents and students to employers and employees, and even our pets, to adjust their schedules for a meaningful benefit. After years of study and discussion, it is clear that Americans value consistency and certainty. Establishing permanent daylight saving time would provide families with more usable daylight hours in the evening, giving people additional opportunities to spend time outdoors, support local businesses, participate in community activities, and enjoy the quality of life that makes our communities so special. Mr. Speaker, I want to add this. This is great for our kids. I want them, and I know most people do, parents want their kids to be outdoors now more than ever. The physical activity means so very much. So for small businesses, particularly those in tourism, hospitality, and recreation, as I said, additional evening daylight can help drive economic activity and create more opportunities to serve customers. In a state like Florida, my home state of Florida, where tourism is a cornerstone of our economy, having more predictable daylight hours is a practical improvement that benefits workers, businesses, and visitors alike. This legislation is also about listening to the American people. Year after year, Mr. Speaker, polls show that strong support for ending the outdated clock change. Families do not want another disruption to their routines. Businesses do not want unnecessary certainty. Americans want a common sense solution. That is exactly what this bill provides. And I've spoken to thousands of constituents on this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, and they agree. They want permanent daylight saving time. I'm proud that this effort has received bipartisan support because this is not about politics. It's about practicality. And again, the ranking member of the full committee, I know Mr. Pallone strongly supports this bill, and he'll have time to say that. It is about recognizing, Mr. Speaker, that our laws should keep pace with the needs of the people we represent. Today, we have an opportunity to take a meaningful step toward delivering something Americans have been asking for: consistency, convenience, and a better way to manage their time. The American people are long past ready to ditch the switch. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this critical piece of legislation, sending it over to the Senate, and I know the President will sign it. I know he's a strong backer, and we appreciate his support again. And finally, we need to bring an end to the twice-yearly clock change. So with that, I will yield back, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate it. I'll reserve my time, though. I will reserve my
Gentleman
balance of
reserves.
my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Okay.
Thank you. I rise today in strong support of the Sunshine Protection Act. This act addresses an issue on which many Americans actually agree, and that's stopping the biannual process of changing our clocks. Only 12% of Americans prefer to switch their clocks twice a year. Far more Americans recognize that the practice is inconvenient and frankly disruptive. Stopping the twice-yearly time change benefits the health and well-being of all Americans. The time change inevitably disrupts sleep patterns and is especially disruptive to the sleep of young children and pets. Time change also is associated with an increase in the rate of heart attacks and strokes in the days immediately following the change. Disturbingly, studies have shown that the increase in stroke rates after the time change are even higher for some of our most vulnerable populations. For example, cancer patients' stroke rates increased by 25%, and people over the age of 65 are 20% more likely to have a stroke in the days following the time change. The Sunshine Protection Act would implement permanent daylight savings time and stop the twice-a-year change that disrupts our sleep and our health. Taking this action will increase the sunshine hours in the evening, allowing many Americans to leave work for more sunlight in the winter months, not darkness. The increased evening sunlight will also provide a needed boost to our tourism industry. Extra sunlight means more time at the beach, more time eating out at restaurants, and more time doing outdoor leisure activities. In my district along the Jersey Shore, tourists can enjoy beautiful coastal areas with serene beaches, embark on fishing ventures along the Atlantic coast, enjoy a nice outdoor concert from iconic musicians in places like Asbury Park, and so much more. Last year alone, New Jersey welcomed more than 120 million visitors to our state, and they contributed more than $50 billion to our state's economy. And our tourism industry needs the boost now today more than ever. The Trump administration's policies, including high visa fees and the detention and harassment of legal tourists, have discouraged travelers from visiting our country because they simply do not feel welcome. Meanwhile, Americans are facing an affordability crisis, forcing families to make difficult trade-offs, including foregoing summer travel. For communities like mine that rely on tourism for our local economies, an extra hour of daylight can make all the difference. Extra daylight also helps deter crime. Researchers at the Brookings Institution found that criminal incidents decreased during an hour of sunlight added to the evening following the springtime change. Making that extra sunlight permanent will help keep our communities safer. And all of these benefits clearly explain why 19 states have already voted to adopt permanent daylight savings time if federal law changed, because right now it doesn't allow them to do that. And these states recognize the benefits, and it is time that Congress allows them to reap those benefits. And for states that have already chosen to follow permanent standard time due to the unique needs of their climate or location, and that includes Arizona and Hawaii, under this bill, they can continue to do so. And other states are allowed under the legislation to adopt permanent standard time prior to the bill's enactment. Ultimately, the benefits of stopping the biannual changing of the clocks are numerous and clear. And moving to permanent daylight savings time will bring much-needed evening sunlight to communities across the United States. So it's time we finally end the process of springing forward and falling back, and I urge my colleagues to support the Sunshine Protection Act, and I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield as much time as she may consume to my good friend, my fellow Florida Gator, Ms. Kamek.
So moved.
I recognize her. Thank you.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in strong support for H.R. 139, the Sunshine Protection Act, introduced by my friend and fellow Floridian, Congressman Vern Buchanan. Now, this is one of those issues that has been highlighted here today that brings us together as Americans, regardless of party, no matter where you are. Everyone always asks the same question every year because we are all equally annoyed. Why in the heck are we still changing our clocks? For decades, we have accepted this ritual of springing forward and falling back, even though it disrupts routines, throws off our sleep, and creates unnecessary frustration for families across the country. Now, I will say, Mr. Speaker, for me, it was always a nuisance. But as a new mom with an infant child, getting the baby on a sleep schedule, and to all the moms and dads of infants, you know what I'm talking about. You get your schedule going, and then you have to spring forward or fall back. And then you start cussing the dang time changes. So, this is personal at this point. It is time we stop changing the clocks and we start using some common sense. Now, Floridians, there's lots of us here in the chamber supporting this bill because, well, Floridians, we are the Sunshine State. We value sunshine. And it is critical that we do this because we all know very closely and firsthand that our communities thrive when our families have more daylight after work and after school. Because that extra hour means more Little League games, more evenings at local parks, more dinners at outdoor patios and restaurants, more customers walking through the doors of all our mom and pop businesses, more time for family to simply enjoy being together. And again, as a Floridian, it is hot in the middle of the day in the summer. It gets nice in Florida in the afternoons and evenings. It'd be nice for us to enjoy a little bit more time. I know I'm making this about Florida, but I'm just being honest. You know, hashtag Make America Florida. For a state like Florida that welcomes millions of visitors every single year, more daylight in the evening means more opportunities. This legislation does exactly what Americans have been asking Congress to do, not just for years, but decades. End outdated practices of changing our clocks twice a year by making daylight savings time permanent. It also respects the choices of states that have already opted out of daylight savings time under current law. And let's be honest, there are very few things that everyone agrees on these days, but whether you're a parent like me trying to get your kids to sleep or get your kids out the door for school, or you're a small business owner, a farmer, a first responder, or someone who just wants one less thing to worry about, changing the clocks twice a year is a hassle that most Americans are ready to leave behind. We all have heard the studies here in the debate today about the real benefits to ending these biannual clock changes. The research has suggested that eliminating the time changes improves public safety, and as the wife of a first responder, I very much appreciate that. It reduces disruptions to sleep and can even provide energy savings. So this bill doesn't create any new federal bureaucracies, it doesn't grow the size of government, and it doesn't impose costly new regulations. Instead, it simplifies life, one less thing for the American people to worry about. Sometimes the best thing in Congress that we can do is remove unnecessary burdens that no longer serve its purposes. And that is exactly what we're doing here today. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a practical bipartisan solution whose time, pun intended, has come. Let's stop asking Americans to reset their clocks every March and November. Let's provide some certainty and consistency and a little more sunshine at the end of the day. I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 139, the Sunshine Protection Act. I thank my friend and colleague, Congressman Vern Buchanan, for his efforts in advancing this and making this a real change that every American can get behind. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from
Thank you,
New
Mr.
Jersey.
Speaker. I yield now 5 minutes to a member of our committee, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Soto.
I thank the gentleman from New Jersey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start with a little history lesson. You know, back in 2013, this was my bill. I wrote this bill. I thought it was a pretty good name, the Sunshine Protection Act, back in the day. And it was for good reason. I got into the state Senate. In the state House, you can only file a certain number of bills, but once we got to the state Senate, I really got gelling on coming up with ideas that would help our state. And, you know, up until that point, every idea on trying to stop the clock change was going to standard time. And no one likes standard time. It's darkness in the wintertime. And so we, as the Sunshine State, a lot of Floridians here and coastal New Jerseyans and others here from Louisiana, we like the sunshine. And so it made far more sense to keep daylight savings time, which is the 8 months out of the year that we have light in the afternoon and evenings. I filed that bill without a press release back in 2013. It became statewide news for 4 years straight. Every time this bill came up, it was the most viewed bill in the Florida Senate for 4 years straight. And I will say, I never got a chance to pass that bill out of the Florida legislature, although I know some of my colleagues who are here today ended up doing it after I was gone. It's one of the burdens of being a Democrat in a Republican-dominated legislature. But here we are, many years later, 13 years later, and an idea that I got to write many years ago now is being led by great leaders like Vern Buchanan. I'm a proud co-sponsor of this, and Gus Billeracas, great Floridians who I enjoy working with, and of course Frank Pallone, our ranking member. And there's a reason this bill was so popular for so long. Small businesses like it because people after work go out to businesses and get to have fun. Beach communities like it, that 1 extra hour of sunshine. Kids can go out and play after school. We saw people are sick of the changing of the clocks. Also, the local farmer doesn't need big government to tell them what time to wake up in the morning. They know what time they want to wake up no matter what, so that change isn't going to affect them at all. And then I encourage schools, education institutions around the nation to adjust school start times based upon what you think is best to keep kids safe. But at the end of the day, we've talked about it's good for business, it's good for recreation, it's good to help out with making sure that we don't have this public health issue every time we're changing the clocks back and forth. It's finally time to bring sunshine across the nation, and I urge my colleagues to support this amazing Sunshine Protection Act, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield as much time as he may consume to the original sponsor of the bill here in the House of Representatives, my good friend, Mr. Buchanan, and I want to thank him for his persistency all these years, along with the former Senator Rubio, who's now our Secretary of State. This has always been a priority for both of them, and I'll yield as much time as I said as he may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of my bill, the Sunshine Protection Act, which would make daylight savings time permanent and finally end the biannual clock switch. Twice a year, Americans are forced to change their clocks. These changes disrupt their schedule for no good reason. The outdated practice is frustrating for families, workers, schools, small business across the country. And let me just tell you, as someone that's been in business for 30 years, this is gigantic, especially for the small business person. You know, with that additional hour a day, at least in Florida, but across the country, makes a big difference in terms of doing business. And ideally, it helps not just small businesses, but small businesses create most of the jobs in Florida as well. So it's key to both. Polling shows that 2/3 of America want to unlock the clock. My bill is simply a solution to make daylight savings time permanent. Allowing an extra hour of sunlight in the evening gives families more time for outside sports, activities, and school. It stimulates small business and, as I said, job creation, retail tourism, while providing more time for youth sports and outside recreation. And let me just tell you, you see a lot of kids today. The number is 20% of children are obese. They need to be out more. This will make a difference for them. There are also significant health benefits associated with DST that would prevent over 200,000 cases of stroke per year. Nearly 2 million people make a big difference as well in terms of obesity. Importantly, this bill allows states to opt out in favor of the standard time if that's important to them. 19 states have passed the deadline for this. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
And I'll reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida. From New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield now 3 minutes to another member of our committee, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 139, the Sunshine Protection Act. Twice a year, Americans lose sleep, disrupt their routines, and pay the price for a practice that's outlived its original purpose. H.R. 139, the Sunshine Protection Act, ends that twice-yearly clock change and makes daylight savings time permanent year-round. Research shows that eliminating the biannual switch reduces the spike in heart attacks, strokes, and workplace accidents that follow the spring-forward transition. Ending the clock change also means fewer disruptions to sleep patterns tied to that adjustment period. On the safety side, permanent evening daylight means more daylight during peak commuting and after school hours, leading to fewer pedestrian and traffic fatalities in the evening. As with many other policies, the impacts are more dramatic for our less affluent neighbors. Hourly workers, shift workers, and families relying on public transit are hit hardest by sudden schedule changes and reduced evening visibility. More evening daylight reduces the need for artificial lighting and heating in the early evening hours, which can help lower household energy use and utility bills. For Louisiana families, many of whom work in agriculture, fishing, and outdoor industries tied to the Gulf Coast, permanent daylight savings time would mean more usable evening daylight for safer work conditions, recreation, and valuable time with their families. The American Farm Bureau Federation supports the Sunshine Protection Act because it provides consistency and reduced disruption for farmers and ranchers. A stable, year-round time system makes it easier to plan work, transportation, and market schedules. For agriculture, ending a twice-yearly change means fewer disruptions to the schedule that livestock and labor already depend on. H.R. 139 offers a simple, permanent fix: no more clock changes, more usable evening daylight, and a system that works better for working families, rural communities, and the American agriculture. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Florida.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as you may consume to my good friend, fellow Florida Gator. Again, I'll give him as much time as he may consume, Mr. Stubbe.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 139, the Sunshine Protection Act. For me, this vote has been nearly a decade in the making. In 2018, at the Braden River Barbershop, shortly after we turned back the clocks to standard time, everyone was complaining about the change. Kids are not waking up on time, everyone is tired, the rise of health-related issues, not able to enjoy activities in the evening, the list went on and on. So the question was, why are we still changing the clocks? And as a state senator in Florida at the time, everyone looked at me and asked if we could do something about it. So we did. That one conversation led to me introducing a bill in the Florida State Senate also called the Sunshine Protection Act. I didn't know that my friend Mr. Soto had filed it before then, so I was happy to carry on the tradition. The idea was pretty simple. Florida is the Sunshine State. We should not be forced to change our clocks twice a year and lose an hour of usable daylight in the evening simply because of outdated federal law. That legislation received overwhelming bipartisan support in Tallahassee. In 2018, the Florida legislature passed the Sunshine Protection Act, and Governor Rick Scott signed it into law. But there was a catch. Florida could not actually implement the law until Congress acted. The bill's success at the state level led to Congressman Vern Buchanan introducing the federal version of the Sunshine Protection Act and introducing it year after year, never relenting on pushing for its passage. The Senate even passing the legislation unanimously in 2022, yet the House never gave it a vote. When I came to Congress in 2019, I continued to fight to make permanent daylight savings time a reality. And today, Mr. Speaker, after nearly a decade of many people working on this issue, we finally have this opportunity. Americans should never again have to participate in this outdated ritual of turning the clocks back and forth. as we can end the disruption that comes every spring and every fall when the federal government tells hundreds of millions of Americans to change their clocks. 19 states have already acted to support year-round daylight saving time once Congress allows them to do so. Florida has been waiting since 2018. And why should we make the change? Well, the consensus that day at the barbershop was clear for Americans. It's unhealthy and difficult on families with young children. Kids should have more daylight after school to play sports and be outside. Floridians should have more time to enjoy our beaches, our parks, and the outdoors. Small businesses, restaurants, and communities benefit when Americans have more usable daylight in the evening. Today, we have an opportunity to finally fix it. I want to thank my fellow Floridian Congressman Vern Buchanan for his leadership on H.R. 139 and for his years of work on this issue. Mr. Speaker, it is time to lock the clock. It is time to make daylight savings time permanent. It's time for Congress to finally pass the Sunshine Protection Act. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. I'll continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield now 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Dean.
Moved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ranking Member Pallone, for this opportunity to talk about the Sunshine Protection Act. I rise in opposition to the bill and the danger it poses to our health and safety. This bill, sadly, is being rushed to the floor as a political bargaining chip without thorough consideration of the impacts, and we have been here before. Permanent time is a national decision with implications for every aspect of our health and economy. It deserves a robust, thoughtful debate and an amendment process that allows members to test each provision of the bill. For example, we should be able to test the provision that eliminates a state's right to opt out of daylight savings time, or the decision to, quote, stop the clock on daylight savings time in the first place. I hear broad agreement in this chamber and beyond that the twice-yearly time changes have acute health consequences. But I want to talk about the chronic, long-term impacts of this bill's late winter sunrise. Early morning light is an important environmental cue to set our body's internal clocks and promote alertness. And dim evening light tells our bodies that it is time to sleep. We function best, scientists tell us, on a physical, mental, and social level when our bodies, the sun, and the clock are the wall that are all aligned. Kids perform better at school. Workers are more alert. That's why observe standard time in the winter months, and why we should at least consider observing it year-round. The American Medical Association, American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the National Sleep Foundation, and dozens of other societies tell us if we stop the clock, permanent standard time is a healthier choice, permanent standard time. But that is not the debate before us. We've been here before. In 1974, children died as a result of permanent daylight savings time attempt then, or trial then, when they were trying to go to school in the dark for hours. In 1974, this was revoked. And more than that, we aren't voting on bills right now that would reduce the sky-high costs of food, fuel, healthcare, or addressing the president's war in Iran. Instead, we're considering a bill that was deadly and dangerous in the past, in the 70s, that we learned from. I hope we don't have to learn that lesson again. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Florida.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I want to add that this bill was heard. The substance of this bill was heard in the Energy and Commerce Committee recently and placed into the Surface Transportation Bill. It does have bipartisan support. And also, if you want your standard time under this bill, you can keep your standard time. 19 states, again, have passed legislation for permanent daylight savings time. So with that, I want to yield as much time as you may consume to my good friend from Texas, Mr. Sessions.
Recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Mr. Bill Rockos and the Energy and Commerce Committee for bringing this forward. My dear friend from Florida, the gentleman Vern Buchanan, years ago began this process understanding that it was more than just an issue that Congress would deal with. It's also an issue, what's called spring forward, what is it? Spring forward, fall back. So you fall back in as we get to October, and that means you lose the time, the light that you'd had all this time. Spring forward is always seen by the American people, and if you serve for Roger Williams and the Republican baseball team, it's an opportunity for you to be able to see for the first time in life what the day is going to look like to catch a fly ball. The bottom line to this whole thing is spring forward, fall back is something that impacts every single American. And it impacts people when they go to work. It impacts people as they try and find time to play with their children at night, just a little bit extra time. It helps people who have retinal or eye issues to be able to see more clearly for longer from the time they get up until the time they work their way home, perhaps after work. And it's no wonder that spring forward, fall back is something that the American people are asking Congress. Please standardize this and give us more light and opportunity. Spring forward and fall back is an opportunity for the American people to have more time in the light of day to not only live their life, but to accomplish those things rather than being in the dark. Mr. Speaker, I will tell you that what this does is it makes it standard across the country, and it does, because I think that's unity and that puts us all in the same, with the same opportunity, and that is what the American people want. So I couldn't exactly say it because I didn't want to say it wrong, but spring forward, fall back is a common sense opportunity that every single person knows and understands, because as we now have enjoyed our spring forward, if we pass this, we do not have to change it to fall back to darkness, to fall back to changes. Lastly, it impacts my staff greatly and anyone in Capitol Hill, because we are very acutely aware that when we get off work, like hundreds of millions of Americans, they go home in the dark. It means that people go into parking lots in the dark. It means that people go and perhaps walk home or drive in the dark at a time it would be a safety factor. So there are, of course, those that do not want this. That really does not bother me. But for us to address this with fear rather than knowing that the American people want this is the issue about what drives me to be here. It is big in Texas because we spend a lot of time outside. But I want to reiterate to the American people, we are listening. It is something we've taken up for a long time. And finally, Vern Buchanan and the Energy and Commerce Committee have brought this bill to us. So I'm very pleased to say I will be an aye vote, and I hope that my colleagues will do the same. I yield back my time to the gentleman from Florida.
Yields.
And I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield myself such time as I may consume.
Repeat that.
I would ask to yield myself such time as I may consume.
Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to address the issue that was mentioned that in 1974, Congress voted to move to permanent daylight savings time and then reverse that decision. I think that 50 years later, things are different. First of all, in the 70s, when that was the case, things have changed in the sense that schools have pushed about start times later in many districts, including in my district. Dramatically fewer kids walk to school. Also, remote and hybrid work has had significant impact on Americans' commuting patterns. So, things are not the same today as they were in the 70s in terms of what people did and how they worked and how they went to school. So passing this bill now, also in the peak summer months, gives everyone, and that's schools, workplaces, transit systems, time to plan for this change well in advance of the darkest winter months. And I think that's important also. I'm also confident that we are setting ourselves up to succeed this time around so Americans can reap the benefits of eliminating the time change. And again, it's the time change that really is the problem. Most of us, whether you're for permanent daylight savings time or permanent standard time, don't want to see the switching back and forth. So I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and again, I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield as much time as you may consume to a good chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee who led this through the committee. We appreciate him so very much, and I'll yield him as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate my friend from Florida yielding. It's fun today because I got my friend from Florida controlling time. I got another friend from Florida speaking for the bill, Mr. Soto, and we got the sponsor from Florida. And I will say also to the American people that, Mr. Speaker, through you, that a very famous resident of Florida mentioned this to me in the Oval Office a couple of weeks ago. So I know it's strong support. So it's aptly called the Sunshine Protection Act. And the reason is people like the longer daylight hours. They feel like daylight even in the wintertime. I live on the very eastern end of Central Time. My district is split almost down the middle. So I represent people who are on the very western end of Eastern Time, and I live on the very eastern end of Central Time. And it does get dark at like 4:30 in the afternoon where I live. And so people want more time and they want more daylight. But the thing is, they just don't want to have to change their clocks. And as my friend from New Jersey talked about in 1974, we did vote to change. It was because of the energy crisis going on when I was a kid. And they changed it in the middle of winter. It was created all kinds of disturbance. And so what we've done with this bill is let people know ahead of time. You're not going to have to change your clock. We have general assemblies that can lock in which time that they want. So we all know that Arizona and Hawaii stays on standard time. They will stay on standard time if their general assemblies so choose. Any other state has the opportunity, whether they're in session or not. I know there's always provision. I know in Kentucky they're not in session, but there's a provision if the Kentucky wants to stay on standard time, they have the governor can call them into session and do so. I don't think they're going to do that, but states have so we've given states flexibility, but we've given our country consistency. And I really appreciate my friend from Florida, Mr. Buchanan, for working hard on this bill. And I believe it's the right time to do it. So I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 139, the Sunshine Protection Act. And I believe it will be good for the American people. So thank you, and I will yield back to my friend from Florida.
Gentleman yields back.
Thank you. And I'll reserve, and I'm prepared to close. But we're going to give you the opportunity, of course.
All right. If you're prepared to close, then I'll start.
Gentleman's recognized.
On our side. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to really stress again why I think that the status quo is bad. I mean, obviously, some people here, I think a majority, would like to see a permanent daylight savings time, and some who I think are, in the minority would like to see a permanent standard time. But the bottom line is we just can't continue the status quo, Mr. Speaker, because the science and research really is clear, and it shows that springing forward and falling back twice a year is harmful to our health. It makes Americans less safe, and it's very unpopular. And studies have shown increases, as I mentioned before, in heart attacks and strokes, mood and sleep disturbances, and hospital admissions in the days after a time change. Studies have also shown that increases in stroke rates, but the time change are even higher for some of our most vulnerable populations, and that includes seniors, for example. The bottom line is American safety is put at greater risk in the days after a time change, and disrupting our sleep has been shown to lead to higher rates of fatal motor vehicle crashes, crimes like robbery, and workplace injuries. So whether or not you agree what should be permanent, the bottom line is that sticking to the status quo and continuing to change our clocks is really the worst option. So I'm going to stand with the 56% of Americans in a recent poll who prefer a shift to permanent daylight savings time to give families more sunlight in the evening hours. And I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back.
Thank you. I will close now, Mr. Speaker. I just want to read off some of the 19 states that proactively passed laws to lock the clock. The great state of Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Alabama, Georgia, Minnesota, Mississippi, Montana, Idaho, Louisiana, South Carolina, Utah, Wyoming, Delaware, Maine, Oregon, Tennessee, Washington, of course, the great state of Florida, so it's not a Florida conspiracy. Mr. Speaker, we want to give people an opportunity to go out in the sunshine, an extra hour a day. And I'm thinking, first of all, safety for our seniors, but also for our children. Our children are on these devices constantly, unfortunately. They should be given an opportunity to go out and encourage them to go out and play ball or whatever they'd like to do with their friends. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I urge a strong, very strong vote in favor of this bill. Again, I yield back the balance of my time, but I will tell you that it's very, very important that we get this done as soon as possible. In closing, I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 139, and I'll yield back, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1423, the previous question is ordered on the bill. The question is on the engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to make daylight savings time permanent and for other purposes.
The question is on the passage of the bill. Okay, those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
And I would ask for the yeas and nays, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The yeas and nays have been requested. Those favoring the vote by the yeas and the nays will rise. Sufficient number have risen. The yeas and the nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote will be followed by a 5-minute vote. Motion to recommit on H.R. 1181. And passage of 1181 if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote.